Well, Merry Christmas and welcome to a video for the Colorado Front Range. As you can see, we're down here in Longmont and we're going to call this project Good Enough. The goal was this year to kind of finish this up, maybe most of Longmont, which I didn't quite get to, but it is coming together, and get it to the point where I could turn my focus away from this and go over to Denver on the other side. We've been very busy, all of us, and this is no exception, and the holiday is no exception. This video was supposed to be out in November and didn't get anywhere close to that. As you can see, we're almost to Christmas. But nonetheless, let's take a look at what's going on. Now, because this is our last view, and if you've never seen this project or any of the videos ahead of time, I want to just kind of give an overview of what we're looking at here. So this is Longmont, Colorado. It's just north of Denver a bit. This is one of the great western sugar mills. If we were to do this in scale, 1/87 scale, this entire complex would be about 15 feet long by 13.5 feet wide. Obviously, we had to compress this quite a bit, and yet it's still a large building and scene here. We are looking at a building that is over, the area here is about 8 feet from where you're standing to the beginning of the throat of the yard here is 8 feet long. The building footprint itself is over 2.5 feet wide and is about 5.5 to 6 feet long, give or take, like I said, 5 inches. So that's what we're kind of looking at. As if you go back through the projects, this is a paper building. So just so you understand that the outside of the brickwork is actually printed paper. Now it's a multimedia building because we've got paper, we've got obviously some acrylics. You can see the tank in there. I've got wood in there. I've done a lot of laser cutting and 3D printing. You can't see too much of the 3D printing. Some of it when we bring over here, you will see a little more. You'll see stars on the building that I 3D printed. You'll see some tanks and some different things that I 3D printed. Matter of fact, a new project I did right here that you can't see, we'll talk about in a minute here. But that being said, that's kind of what we're looking at. And part of the licensing to get this all to fit in here, this yard here, which is the sugar beet yard, was actually on the other side of the building. There was a road in between it, and then a yard that the Colorado Southern dropped off the cars over there. Then the Great Western went and picked them up over there and brought them over to this yard, or however they transferred them out. Doesn't matter, we compressed it all into, this is one yard servicing all the needs that they had. And so what the whole operations of this area here, and really what we're looking at, is how many cars we could generate out of this one scene here. So this scene here, on average, every day receives about 3 gondolas of coal. It receives 2.5 so 2 to 3 gondolas of coke and limestone that's piled over here. And then it's going to get about 15 to 16 cars of sugar beets on this thing. So right away, we're talking coming into this, and then you got bags and a few other things. So you got maybe one boxcar of that. So you've got, so here, let's call this 3, let's call that 3, that's 6, and 16, that's 24, 25 cars coming into this area here. Empty cars that'll come in will be some tank cars, and the products that they will be shipping out of here will be the sugar, the molasses. One of the byproducts that you get from this is as the limestone goes through to purify the sugar for crystallization, that lime becomes a fertilizer for a farmer. So that's a lime fertilizer that becomes available. So that's another tank car that goes out. And then the other thing, the building that I didn't include into here is the pulp warehouse, in which they take the pulp from the sugar beets and mix it with some of the molasses to create a cattle feed. And that is another product that will be shipped out of here. And we're going to ship it right out of the warehouse. Unfortunately, I couldn't build that pulp warehouse in the feed area there. But nonetheless, that is kind of what we're dealing with. Now, in front of you there, you also see, I believe you can see a gray building there. That is sugar beet seeds. And the seeds were saved so that as farmers needed to get new sugar beet seeds, they would actually come and purchase them from the sugar mill and then grow the sugar beets, and then the sugar beets would be sold back to the mill. And that's the relationship between the farmer and the sugar mill. So that's all that you're seeing in here. Now, as far as the model itself, you can see, like I said, there's laser cutting and stuff like that you can see into there. As we bring this around, we'll show you some of the other stuff. It's close to being done. I would say about 75%. I still have some tanks that I need to put into here. I've got a wet rack that I need to get built. And once that's done and everything is all set up, I also need to build a control panel here, a local panel for controlling this area here. Everything is all in place. Half of the servos are in place for the turnouts. The rest will be put in soon. And that sugar beet mill control panel, the local panel, needs to be built over here. So those are the things that need left to be done. But the building for itself is fairly done. Now, the lighting is not done inside of it or outside of it yet. Part of lighting inside is I need to build some type of structure so that you can't see through the building. I don't want it totally blocked because in all actuality, this building is housing a lot of large equipment inside there. So while it's tall and everything else, there's a lot of, for instance, in here, there's a type of boiler type situation in here. You have a boiler in the boiler house, and all these type of things need to be built as well. Detailing on the outside, I could spend 6 months doing that. There is more piping that needs to go in, piping from the main building to back over to this side of the building that sends the sugar, water, syrupy stuff that goes into the boiler in here, and then that in turn gets sent back over to the mill where it goes to the crystallization centrifuges. So all of that has to be put in too. But I've got some basic structure in here that actually makes it look complete and fairly well done. I've got some more ground cover to do, but overall, the building is mostly done. So I'm going to take and move this camera over to this side over here. We're going to take a look at it. There's a segment I'm going to put in between the two here that is about a product that I ran into through the military modelers, and I'll talk about it in the next segment here. But it's really an interesting project, and then from there you'll come over to here, you'll see this, and you'll see the completed project that I'm going to show you. So in any case, hold fast and we'll make a move here on the camera. Recently, I'm a big fan of military modeler channels on YouTube. I probably watch about 7 or 8 of them. I ran across a product that they were using, and I seen that it's been used by other modelers, but I decided I would share at least my experience with it and some of the things I've learned about it. The product is from AK. It's called Concrete and Asphalt. These are, and it's called Terrain Diorama Series. They make a couple different styles of them, but I found these two to be very interesting because as model railroaders, we deal with a lot of roads and different things like that. So I was really kind of interested in this product. As typical, when I order things, I immediately get them literally from the store, and then, or when they arrive, I immediately begin to experiment with them. And my first thoughts on these two products is really very promising. This is the concrete right here, and this is the asphalt, obviously. But let's talk about the asphalt first, and we'll get into concrete in just a second. The asphalt, this is it right here, this really dark stuff. Very flat, but it still has some reflective qualities that I find to be very much like a brand new road. So if you're doing a new road and you want to have something like this would be fantastic. The pitting on it is a lot less than it is on the concrete. very acceptable for HO scale. So I really was very pleased with it overall. I did experiment a little bit with some white washes. I tend to like to work in oils and enamels for my washes. I'm not a fan of acrylic washes. I think they dry way too fast, and I'm just not really happy with them. But I do still use a lot of oils, and I am a huge fan of oils. They're very slow to dry. They give me plenty of time to work and be patient, and no exception with this. So very pleased with it. On the concrete, first observation, the pitting would be perfect if I was doing a 1/48th scale, 1/35th scale, be just fine. But doing HO scale, I thought the pitting was a little deeper than I would like. So I did have a couple experiments with them and move forward with it. The staining, though, using the oil, this is probably the original color right up into here. You may not be able to see it. It's a little lighter than this. The gray is perfect. I have no complaints about the gray color that they chose to use. It works really well. I then, again, took some stains and created the staining and did put some scratches in to see if I could get the scratching in this. Fantastic. Just perfect. But let's get into what I did to make it work. One of the things that I typically do when I'm dealing with experiments is I like to work with shirt cardboard. I get this from Blick Art. I think they call it 30 ply 0.1 inch cardboard. And it's relatively, if you grew up as a baby boomer, our shirts used to come back to, this is how they made them stand up. Today they just fold them together and pin them, and they do something entirely different. But I really do like this stuff. I do a lot of mock-ups with it, and as you can see, I cut with the laser with it. This was my mock-up to see if it was going to fit into my area and what I was looking for and going to do a good job. I was a little smaller, so I went a little larger. Again, here's the cardboard back here. Now, you don't have to put it on the cardboard. I put it on the cardboard because I'm experimenting, and I didn't want to put it straight on the table because if I did, then I have an acrylic mess I have to clean up. So by putting it on cardboard, it allowed me to experiment with it and move off site and not have a problem with it whatsoever. So I did that. I laid it down onto the cardboard. I then took basically water bottles and kept the acrylic wet, and with my fine spatula, a paint spatula or something like that, I smoothed it out until I got all the ribs and ridges out of it, and I tried to get it as smooth as possible and then let it dry. When it dried, it still pitted like the product would. I still thought it was a little more than I wanted. It was better than what it was when it came straight out of the bottle, but I wanted it to be finer. So what I ended up doing is I took 120 sandpaper, sanded it down, and then followed up with 400 grit sandpaper, and that really seemed to smooth it down to what I consider an acceptable level. You kind of sometimes are stuck with what you got. I like the product a lot. I then took my dental picks and I just carved in my grooves for my expansion joints and then stained them with oils, and I got this result. Very, very pleased with it. Very pleased indeed. Now, of course, being it's on cardboard, it did curl up some, but if you've been in this hobby long enough, gluing curled up things is nothing new. I tend to use 1, 2, 3 blocks, and then when I set them down on the corners, they will simply just glue into place, and I'll work it all the way back until it's flat. Not a big deal. And then when I fit the scenery into it, it'll be just fine, and no one will know any the worse for it. Overall, I think the product is exceptional. I'd highly recommend it. It is got a couple extra steps. The asphalt, I'm going to be experimenting more with it. I typically do roads in plaster, but plaster is such a messy product, and this is much cleaner, much easier to work with. I got this whole thing done in probably dry time and all. This square area probably got done in, I don't know, 5 hours. And that's stained and everything. So I'm very pleased with it overall. Works exceptionally well. So I'd highly recommend this just for your own interest. And if you're curious what time period asphalt roads are, I ran down a rabbit trail to look at asphalt. The first asphalt road is actually from about 400 or 600 BC. I was kind of like, wow, they've been around for a long time. I'm sure they're nothing like the asphalt roads we see today. But asphalt roads were actually pretty common in the U.S. in about 1890 in most of the big cities. So don't be afraid to use asphalt if you're doing transitional period or things like that. It'll fit just fine. Concrete will as well. I'm going to be in Denver doing some bridges, some new bridges. That's one of the other reasons why I looked at this product, because I really wanted to do those concrete road bridges correctly, and this was a good experiment for me to try it out and see how it works. So so there you go, new product, and give it a shot. I think I got these online. I think I paid about $16 for them. There's quite a bit of product in here. I barely scratched it to do this experiment in this one. So yeah, give it a shot. It's worth your time. Till then, we'll talk to you in a little while. All right, so now looking at the other side of the sugar mill, you get another perspective of how big this building complex really is. As you can see now, in front of there's the coke and the limestone. And then a couple things I want to address on those. Actually, I had a crazy idea, woke up in the middle of the night and thought it was a crazy idea, and so I went ahead and did it. Those two piles are 3D printed. Now, they're not completed yet. They need to be anchored down and look a little more natural. But by 3D printing those piles and then gluing the coke and the limestone on there, and I'm not happy with that tan limestone. I might be switching it over to a gray limestone. But nonetheless, it does give you the effect and the feeling of the two piles of coke and limestone, which would be stored there on that cement pad that I showed you earlier in the other segment. You can see it's all fitted in now, and it looks like it's always been there and been anchored down. You can also see just some of the other work that's all been done on this building. There is, I don't know if you can see it, there's a 3D printing and some detail work, and I'm going to pop up some photos here onto this to take a look at it, of some of the work and some really in-depth photos that I can throw on here that the video just doesn't always capture. But nonetheless, this is the building complex and the sugar mill, and it's just to the point now where we're going to call it complete. Ballast has gone in through here, and speaking of the ballast, I do want to talk about ballast. Oftentimes when we're doing ballast work, you know, we go to the different companies and they have grays and browns and different colors, but as we go out to the sites, as a matter of fact, when I went to this very facility and took photographs of it, I took notice of the ballast that was there. It's very unique. As a matter of fact, to the point that I was like, you know, I need to capture these colors. And I actually grabbed 4 pieces of rock and threw it in my luggage to bring back home so that when I was creating the ballast for my track, that I could duplicate it. And I went through all the companies. I went through Arizona Rock and everybody, Woodland Scenics, everybody, and just couldn't really find a color that matched what I had. So I ended up taking and mixing 3 of the ballasts that I had bought, mauve, a limestone color, and gray, to create the color that matched the close enough that I was happy with the ballast that's in there. So again, another situation where, you know what, if you can't find what you're looking for, you can make it yourself, blend it a little bit. So that's what we have for this month. I'm sorry the video's maybe not that long, but it's been a busy month for us, and I have been focused just entirely on getting as much as I can completed to this scene. and as we begin to turn in 2020 to Denver. And the goal is to get that done to the point that we can then show some operations. We'll be running a local train coming out of Denver into here, switching this area here, and then eventually returning back to Denver. It's going to take some time because I've got to finish the electrical controls from here, and I want to finish a little more detail into this area here. But again, that's something I'll just do as time goes on. But I really am turning my focus to Denver. I've got some bridges that I've already begun the process of drawing up and figuring out what's going on from there. So in any case, I hope you enjoyed this update. I hope you enjoy the building. Here's a few photos of the sugar mill, some in-depth photos, and until next time, happy modeling and Merry Christmas.